Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to today's session. So, today we would be talking about literary forms, and we would be discussing these literary forms with regard to previous year questions. Yeah. So, based on the questions that have been asked in the earlier exams, we would try and understand the various literary forms. So, the first thing is this is actually a question that has already been asked in one of the exams. In fact, all of them are questions that have been asked in the earlier exams. So if you can try and answer these questions, it will be very, very helpful. So you have a passage here and you have to find out what figure of speech is used here. Yeah, is it paranomia or synesthesia, apheresis or synecdoche? What is it? I will in fact be explaining what each of this is, but if you can try and answer this question, that would be good. Yeah. Oh, for a draught of vintage that hath been cooled a long age in the deep delved earth, tasting of flora and the country green, dance and the provincial song and sunburn mirth. Can you at least guess from where this passage has been taken? This passage has been taken from Ode to Nightingale by John Keats. Yeah. Yeah, so this passage is from Ode to Nightingale by John Keats. Now, a very important thing that you should look at is tasting of flora and flora. Tasting of flora is actually something that appeals to the senses. So, the answer is synesthesia. Now, what is synesthesia? Synesthesia is something that appeals to the senses. Alright. The senses, it could be a visual imagery that is used, or it could be an auditory, a tactile, or a gustatory imagery. So if you have any of these, if it appeals to the senses, then in that case it is called as synesthesia. Alright. Now here, this particular passage, you have phrases like tasting of flora, sunburn mirth, country green. Now country green is actually a visual imagery that appeals to your visual senses. So this, provincial song, dance and provincial song, you have visual and auditory images as well. So this is an example of synesthesia. Now let's look at the other three as well. What is paranomia? Paranomia is wherein you have, it's like a pun, alright? A pun is what is called as paranomia, wherein a confusion between two words, two similar words is used in order to arise or arrive at a meaning. Now, for example, in this sentence is again from Donne's poem, one of Donne's poem. If you know the poem, you can comment it in the chat box. It's actually a very, very famous and an important poem. Yeah. When thou hast done, thou hast not done, for I have more. Now, this more, people say it refers to Anne More, who is Donne's wife. And this done, D-O-N-E, the past participle of do stands for his own name, which is done, yeah. And the poem is Batter My Heart. So this is pun. Pun is paranomasia, alright, wherein you have a word which has more than a single meaning. You can use it to refer to other things as well. That is what is called as paranomasia. The next is synesthesia. Synesthesia is something that appeals to the senses. Like I told you, it could be visual, it could be auditory, it could be tactile, meaning the sense of touch. It could be gustatory. Yeah, it could be any of them. Alright, it could be olfactory as well. The next is apheresis. Apheresis is wherein there is the syllabic loss or the initial vowel loss. For example, especially becomes specially. One more example could be around becomes round, wherein the initial vowel sound is lost. Yeah, you remove the initial vowel sound, and that is an instance of apheresis. Here again you have specially coming from especially. E is removed and then you have specially. The next is synecdoche. Synecdoche is again wherein a part is used to represent the whole. Now synecdoche, you could understand this as a type of metonymy as well. Now when I say hired hands, hired hands stands for labor or laborers, yeah. So that is an instance of synecdoche. The next thing, full fathom 5 thy father lies. Full fathom 5 thy father lies. So this is an example of assonance, alliteration, apostrophe or enjambment. What's it? Here the answer is alliteration. Now alliteration is wherein you have the repetition of the initial consonant sounds. Yeah. So here you have the repetition of the first sound. So therefore this is an instance of alliteration. Now alliteration, you could divide it. In fact, there are different types of alliteration. We could say one is assonance and the other could be consonance. Consonance is again the repetition of the consonant sound, but here the thing is it need not have to be the initial consonant sound. Alright, in case of alliteration it needs to be the initial consonant sound that gets repeated, but that's not the case with assonance. It could be in the middle or at the end also, but it's a consonant sound that gets repeated, and that is consonance. When I say assonance, assonance is the repetition of vowel sounds. When vowel sounds get repeated, then that is called as assonance. The next is apostrophe. Now, when I say apostrophe, we're referring to something that is not present. Alright. For example, John Keats refers to the urn in the Ode to a Grecian Urn, and he says, "Thou art unravished bride of quietness." Now, he's talking to the urn. Alright. So, he's referring to the urn, which is an inanimate object. Alright. So, that is an instance of apostrophe. Yeah. And similarly, tiger, tiger, burning bright in the forest of the night. William Blake is calling out to the tiger. It's not necessary that the tiger is present right in front of him. So that is again an instance of apostrophe. So one way in which you can identify if a given sentence is is using apostrophe is by the presence of O. O captain, my captain. That is again an instance of apostrophe. O captain. Walt Whitman is referring to Abraham Lincoln. So, O captain, I mean, that person is not present. He could also be a dead person. So, he's referring to a dead person. So, that is an instance of apostrophe. And most often you have O. O, my dear friend. Alright. Such sentences with O generally use apostrophe as the figure of speech. The next is enjambment. Now, when I say enjambment, enjambments are also called as run-on lines. Run-on lines or enjambment. Now, when I say run-on lines, it means that a line, in poetry basically, a line moves on to another line, and then that moves on to another line without a punctuation mark. There's no punctuation mark in between, and these lines keep running on to the next line. So that is what is called as enjambment. Now here you have the next question. What is trochee? And you have 4 options as well. If you can try and answer them. Now all of these things basically iamb, trochee, dactyl, anapest, all these are various metrical feet we say in prosody. So what is trochee? Any guesses on what the answer is? Yeah, so trochee is basically a syllabic foot of verse in which the stress falls on the first syllable. Now, basically, every word will have a stress pattern in English, basically. So, every syllable, or in fact, every line of poetry will, of course, have a pattern to it. For example, let's pick up this line, the first line from Elegy Written on a Country Churchyard. The, sorry, the curfew tolls the knell of parting day. If we were to talk about this particular line of poetry, yeah, the curfew tolls the knell of parting day. Yeah. Alright, so this one unstressed, you generally refer an unstressed syllable using this U symbol like this, yeah, and you refer to a stressed syllable using this mark, yeah. So, one stressed and one, one unstressed and one stressed syllable together, that is iamb. Alright, now this sentence is in iambic meter, we find out. And because there are, how many feet do you have? There's one here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah? So there are 5 feet here, just a minute. 2, 3, 4 and 5. So 1 feet, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 foot, 2 feet, 3, 4 and 5. So therefore you say this is in pentameter. Alright. So likewise, this entire sentence or the poem is written in iambic pentameter, we say. Likewise, you have dactyl, wherein you have one stressed and two unstressed syllables together. Anapest is wherein you have two unstressed and one stressed syllable. And trochee is where you have two stressed and one unstressed syllable. Yeah. So that is meter. So this thing is probably one thing that you can remember. And questions have been asked in the earlier exams also based on that. Now, moving on to poetic forms. Keats's lyric, La Belle Dame Sans Mercy, combines two poetic forms. What are they? What are the two poetic forms that are combined? So basically, to talk about La Belle Dame Sans Mercy, it means a beautiful lady without mercy. It's French. So Keats is basically talking about a soldier who's in love with a lady and the lady does not reciprocate that love back. Yeah? So that is what is the main idea of La Belle Dame Sans Mercy. Now this poem is basically written in the form of a ballad, yeah, and a lyric, of course. That is in the question itself, Keats' lyric. So it's of course a lyric and a ballad. Now, what is a ballad? A ballad is basically a story in the form of poetry. You have a story that is narrated in the form of poetry. Another famous example of a ballet is the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Yeah, so that is by S.T. Coleridge. So that again is an example of a ballad. Yeah, so this poem basically consists of 12 stanzas, and you have something called as a ballad meter. In a ballad, every stanza consists of 4 lines. And in this particular ballad, it again consists of 4 lines. Each stanza consists of 4 lines. And it is written in this rhyme scheme, A, B, C, D. So that is the rhyme scheme that is followed throughout the poem. Next is free verse. Now, most often we tend to confuse between free verse and blank verse, right? So you have a question on free verse here. You have to find out which of the following is not true with regard to free verse. Which is not true? Characterized by short irregular verse. Yeah, that's true. No rhyme pattern. That again is true with regard to free verse. You don't have any rhyme scheme in free verse. Written in iambic pentameter. Depends on the effective and more intense use of pauses. Yeah, the last statement is again true with regards to free verse. This thing about iambic pentameter is false, because in free verse, if you use free verse and if you use iambic pentameter, like in free verse meaning there's no rhyme pattern, but you use iambic pentameter, then in that case it becomes blank verse. Okay, it is no longer free verse. Free verse is wherein you don't follow any of these patterns. Yeah? Free verse is poetry that is not restricted by any strict meter or rhyme scheme. The lines can be of any length. Yeah, and the French name is verse libre. I mean, basically, free verse is just writing poetry, not based on any set rhythmic pattern or any rhyme scheme. But like I said, if you were to write it in a strict meter, if you write it in iambic pentameter and if there's no rhyme scheme, it becomes blank verse and not free verse. And who is the father of free verse? Walt Whitman is the father of free verse. The next is the phrase loud color is an example of dash. We looked at this at the beginning of the presentation itself. Loud color. Yeah, like I told you at the beginning, loud and color, it appeals to two senses. One is the auditory, and color, when we talk about color, it is visual. Yeah, so the answer is synesthesia, and we will look at the other options as well. Yeah, synecdoche, we've looked at synecdoche and synesthesia earlier. So we'll talk about paralipsis and about redundancy. Okay. Now when we talk about paralipsis is wherein you actually say you're omitting a particular thing, but you're actually trying to draw attention to that. The fact that you're omitting a particular thing itself makes it very important. Alright. To understand this in simpler terms, you could look at an example like something happening in the movie Padayappa, wherein Rajini says, மாப்பிள்ளை போட்டிருக்க சட்டையை பத்தி எனக்கு தெரியாது, meaning he is indirectly drawing attention to the shirt that the person is wearing. Alright, so you're omitting, you say you will omit that thing, you say you will not talk about it, you say you will not talk about the shirt, but then you're deliberately drawing attention to the shirt. Yeah, that is an instance of paralipsis. The next thing is redundancy. Redundancy is wherein you're repeating the same thing using different words. Alright. In Tamil, if we were to understand this, Variya va. You say Variya va. Variya itself means are you coming? Yeah. Variya va again is redundant because both these words actually mean the same thing. Now, or if you were to understand this in English itself, I will revert back to you. I will revert back is wrong simply because revert itself means you're getting back with an answer or with a solution or something like that. So revert back is again an instance of redundancy. So when you repeat the same thing using different words, you actually mean only one particular thing, but you're using too many words to refer to that particular thing. Then that is called as redundancy. Alright. So these are certain terms that I wanted to draw your attention to. Now Ben Jonson's pleasure reconciled to virtue is a dash. Ben Jonson is a master of this, we could say. In fact, Ben Jonson was the first writer to have started writing this in this genre. Domestic tragedy, mask, villanelle, closet drama. Yeah, the answer is mask, and Ben Jonson is said to have been the master of masks. Yeah, like you see here on the slide, Ben Jonson introduced masks. So this thing that you have over here, pleasure reconciled to virtue, is a mask that was written by Ben Jonson. Now, to look at the other literary forms, say for example, domestic tragedy. So, what is domestic tragedy? Domestic meaning something that has to do with common people, everyday situations, and so on. So, domestic tragedy is wherein the protagonists are ordinary working class people or even middle class individuals. And a very famous domestic tragedy is A Woman Killed with Kindness by Thomas Heywood. Yeah, you could consider even Death of a Salesman as a domestic tragedy. By Arthur Miller, Death of a Salesman is also considered as a domestic tragedy because you talk about an ordinary salesman, his life, his problems, and his tragic death towards the end. Yeah, so that is an instance of domestic tragedy. And what is a mask? A mask is basically a short skit sort of a thing that is performed for the royal court. Say, for example, if I am the king or the queen, if I have a banquet, then I will arrange for a mask. Yeah, wherein people will come and just entertain the audience for quite some time. So it's a performance that is meant primarily for the court and for the royal purposes. So the first mask that was performed was in the 12th night, and the date is 6th Jan 1618, and masks were introduced into English literature primarily by Ben Jonson. Alright. Villanelle is basically a 19-line poem with 5 tercets and a quatrain. What is the tercet? Tercet is a stanza form that consists of 3 lines. 3-line stanza, the tercet, and a quatrain is a 4-line stanza. So a ballad uses a quatrain, yeah. And the next is closet drama. Closet drama, closet itself means it's sort of a cupboard, right? Just take the work. I mean, you take the drama at your hand and then you place it inside a closet and you lock it. Meaning it is not meant for performing. It is just meant to be read. It cannot be produced. It's not for stage production. Yeah. So that is what is called as a closet drama. And you have 2 examples here. Samson Agonistes. Who wrote it? Who wrote Samson Agonistes and who wrote the Dynasts? Both of them are closet dramas. Samson Agonistes was by Samson Agonistes by Milton. Yeah, if you're watching and if you know the answers, you can type in the answers in the chat box. And Dynasts is by Hardy, Thomas Hardy. Alright. Yeah, so with that, I will close for today. And if you have any doubts, you can get back to me. Alright. Yeah. Thank you.